Welcome, everyone. I'm Molly Devine, and I'm the Individual Giving Manager for Women Who Code. Thank you for joining today's session, Building More Inclusive Android Apps, Animation and Reduced Movement. Please welcome our amazing speaker, Eeva-Jonna Panula. Eeva-Jonna, or Avis, is an accessibility specialist and senior Android developer. She is also IAAP Certified Professional in Web Accessibility and Women Tech Makers Ambassador. Her passion is to share knowledge, and she speaks and writes a blog. When she's not doing that, she explores the beautiful Finnish nature, either by foot or kayak. Thank you, Eeva-Jonna, for being here today. I'll now pass the session over to you.
Thank you. Let me start with a story. It was about 2 years ago. It was Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and I was working. Well, on my computer, I had this big screen. This is important detail. And I got a call from a recruiter. And they introduced themselves and told in which company they are working. And at the same time, when they were telling something about the company or about the position or whatever, I was just checking out the company's website. As mentioned, I had the big screen. It was like the browser window. It was on full screen mode, and I googled the company website, and I started scrolling down, and then it hit me. I started feeling nauseous, disoriented, because of the animations and motion that was going on that site. And then I started saying something like, I'm really sorry, but I just checked your website, and there is this movement, and I have this this condition, and I'm sorry, I feel really bad, and then I had to end the call. To be honest, I have no idea what I actually said, but this is what I think I tried to say there. I don't know if the recruiter got the problem, but for me, that was like a really horrible situation because, I tried to be polite at that point. And after that, I needed to go lay down for a while. I couldn't continue working for a while because I felt so bad, like nauseous and disoriented and bad. I could just use that word. So that was really not a nice experience, I could say. And now you might be wondering what happened. Well, I have this condition why certain kinds of movement might make me sick. We will get back to what is this movement and what is actually problematic movement a bit later in the talk. But at this point, let's just say that there is a movement that might make people sick. And now you also might be wondering, how do I survive the internet, the mobile apps, the world, basically, because there are so many animations out there. Well, there is actually a setting called reduced motion or remove animations, depending on the operating system. And I use that, but we will also get back to that one a bit later. So yeah, these are basically the topics we are going to talk about today, and concentrating on Android and how this setting works on Android. So yeah, but before we dive into this topic, couple of words about myself. So hi everyone, my name is Eeva-Jonna, or Eevis, as mentioned. And also, as mentioned, that I'm accessibility specialist and senior Android developer, and I work at Oura. So I actually have 2 rings here. So if you've ever heard of us, we have this Oura ring. So yeah, that's the company where I work at. And also, as mentioned, I am a certified professional in web accessibility and Women Tech Makers Ambassador. And I really love to share what I've learned. So I blog, I speak, I'm here today. And Other than that, I'm also a disabled person, which you might have guessed from the intro I gave. And also, as mentioned, I'm also kayaker and hiker. You know, Finnish nature is just awesome. If you ever get to visit Finland, make sure that you will explore the nature as well, not just like cities or urban areas, also the nature. And on my slide, I have a picture. This was taken last weekend. I was kayaking in one of the Finnish national parks called Kolovesi. And in the picture, you can see the lake. It's not still, but it's almost still, I could say. And then there is the nose of my kayak, which is white, and then there is a pink stripe in the center. And then at the background, there are a couple of islands with woods, and then the sky is almost clear. It's blue, and then there are some clouds. But yeah, also highly recommend checking out Kolovesi National Park if you ever end up to Finland. But yeah, I think that is about me. And yeah, maybe mentioning I'm from Finland. I didn't I had written this down that I need to remember to say this like the first thing, but I always forget. But yeah, I'm from Finland. And let's get to the actual talk. And first, we are going to talk about animations and accessibility in general, and like what is actually problematic movement and why the movement can be problematic. And after that, on the second part, we will look into more Android specific things and the reduced motion setting. So first, animations and accessibility. When I talk about accessibility, I basically mean that anyone, despite of having disabilities or impairments, can use a digital product. So like be it an app, website, whatever. And this also means that these digital products work with assistive technologies such as screen readers or switch devices or different settings such as reduced motion or remove animations. So that's the really short definition of accessibility and what I mean here. And why I talk about animations? Well, you heard my story and like this is definitely not the only time this has happened, but it's maybe the most memorable one, unfortunately. But it happens all the time because, well, animations, they are everywhere. And I also want to raise awareness on this topic because I know that it's not really that known thing. So that's why I also want to talk about it. And let's touch the problem with animations and why they can be problematic. I have two reasons for that. First of all, animations can actually trigger different kinds of symptoms, such as nausea, dizziness, feeling disoriented, or seizures, or other symptoms as well. But there is also one more side, not just these different kinds of symptoms. It's also about distraction. So animations can actually be really distracting. I don't know if you've ever tried to read content, be it on a web page or a mobile app, and then there is some animations happening somewhere near the content. At least for me, it's really hard to concentrate because my attention is drawn to the animations all the time, and it's trying to read through a text with conditions like that, so that there is some animations around. That's really hard. And I bet that I'm not actually the only one to feel like that. And I know I'm not the only one. So yeah. What then causes these two things that I mentioned? I want to talk about two different types of disabilities. But even when I'm talking about these disabilities, I want to remind you that it's not just about disabled people. It's also like anyone can feel like there are different things that might affect, for example, concentration, being stressed out or like tired or things like that can also make you feel like or like hard to concentrate, for example. So it's not just about these disabilities, but I want to raise these as an examples. So first of all, vestibular disorders. That's an umbrella term for different disorders or conditions that affect the vestibular system. So the system that affects, for example, balance. And these are usually causes for like animations triggering symptoms. And some examples of these vestibular disorders are, for example, benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, vestibular migraine, labyrinth. I'm sorry, these words are sometimes really hard. Labyrinthitis or vestibular neuritis or Meniere's disease, age-related related dizziness and imbalance, or vestibular damage due to head injury, or secondary endolymphatic hydrops, or that's like the examples I'm going to give. The words are getting so much harder, so I'm not even going to try, but these are some examples. And what causes these vestibular disorders? There are different reasons, such as, for example, traumatic brain injuries might cause some of these vestibular disorders, ear infection, migraines, strokes, and sometimes the reason remains unknown. For example, for the benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, the reason actually usually remains unknown. And that's what happened to me at some point, for example. So yeah, vestibular disorders can cause animations not to be so pleasant. And the other thing is cognitive disabilities. These are sometimes like, especially the causes might be kind of like the same as for vestibular disorders. So for example, head injuries might cause cognitive disabilities. For example, like myself, I've hit my head, and due to that, I have a cognitive disability. But also different things like autism or ADHD or other such conditions might affect, for example, like the might affect concentration, which again might lead to animations being distracting. So yeah, these are two examples of causes. There might be other causes as well, but if you are thinking that it's just small group of people, well, I actually have to say that it's like really big group of people. I don't remember the exact numbers, and especially for the vestibular disorders, there is not that much data because it's an umbrella term and it's hard to gather data and in different countries. But for cognitive disabilities, they are actually the biggest group of disabilities. And again, I can't remember numbers, but I should have written something down. But now I, of course, realized that I like when I didn't write down, I don't remember it in this situation. But these are big groups. All right. Let's then move to what actually makes movement problematic. And I'm going to use Valhead's article, Designing Safer Web Animation for Motion Sensitivity, as a resource for this one. And then I have one additional item. But in this article from A List Apart from 2015, it's still really relevant article. Valhead found three like reasons for like movement being problematic. So these are relative size of the movement, mismatched directions, and distance covered. And let's talk a bit more about these next. So the relative size of the movement. So if the animation is relatively big, for example, it's more likely to cause symptoms, for example, or trigger symptoms than if the relative size is small. So even on like a mobile phone screen, if the animation takes the whole screen, like a transition from one activity to another, that might be really problematic. For example, for myself, these like transitions are something that make me, well, not to feel like I described in the beginning, but they make me feel a bit uneasy, and I know that if I had to watch them a lot, then I would start feeling probably nauseous at some point. And it's also about perceived space. So how like we perceive the space, is it if it's big or not. Then the mismatched directions and speed. It's about like if you are basically scrolling one way and the movement goes another way, that might be really problematic. And personally, for me, these like animations that go scroll like horizontally when I'm trying to scroll vertically are like, they are the worst actually. So if you remember an HTML element called marquee from the history, it's already deprecated, but unfortunately that animation is still used in many places. So it was basically an element that was scrolling horizontally. Well, that's something that I really hope that I will never ever see again, because that's really a problem for myself. So yeah, and then parallax scrolling, that's another problem, because usually the speed directions are mismatched compared to when you are, or when the user is scrolling down. This is more visible on the web, but I've seen it on mobile as well. And for some reason, there are at least designers who like it a lot, and I'm usually just trying to explain that, hey, maybe we don't want to do that. Not in my current company, but like in the history. So yeah. And then the third one is the distance covered. So basically, this is related to both of, and especially with the relative size of the movement, but basically with the mismatched directions and speed. But if the distance is long, that like the animation is covering, so if it's covering like lots of real space, so not just like relative space, but also like real space. So if the actual screen is big and then it covers the whole screen, that's really problematic. And especially if it goes to like a direction or in a speed that's mismatched with scrolling, for example. So yeah. So these were the three things I wanted to raise from Valher's article. And the fourth problematic thing I wanted to talk about is movement near content. I already mentioned that if there is some animations near the, like when user is trying to read something and then there is some movement near there, it's really like often catching the attention. And then like if you're trying to get back to reading and then there is again something and you're again looking at that like animation and not the text, it's really hard to concentrate on that. And especially if you have some like challenges with concentration, it makes it even worse if there are these like animations that steal your attention. So yeah. But now that I've been talking about animations being bad, and I think everybody thinks that I hate all of them, and like I never want to see any animations anywhere, I actually want to say that not all animations are bad, because animations can actually help to, for example, like build connections between items and help people to understand, or users to understand, relationships, for example, between two items or concepts or like whatever. So there are good things. And usually if the animation is on, for example, non-moving objects, so it's about like color change or like can't think of anything else right now, but if it's, for example, a color change or opacity change, then it's less likely to cause problems, at least trigger symptoms, but it can still be distracting. So that's a good thing to remember as well. But yeah, so maybe like what I hope that you remember from this first part is that be mindful of like when you are using animations, and remember that the bigger the animation, the more movement, it is more likely to cause some problems. All right, let's then switch to Android specific things. And yeah, so as mentioned, there is this setting that I am using so that like I don't see that much animations. So it's called either reduced motion or remove animations. I know that on like iOS, I think it's like reduced motion, but then on Android, it's most likely like remove animations. And on the web, it's called reduced motion. So that's why it's the word that I use, because like what I didn't say in my introduction is that I have a background in web development, and I've actually switched to Android not that long ago. So like I'm still thinking lots of things in like, well, how I learned them basically, like on the web world. But yeah. And this setting, it's an operating system level setting, and websites and apps, they can actually respect it. On the mobile side, the things are way better, I could say, because usually they are respected. We are going to talk about the situations when they are not respected on Android in a bit, but usually they are respected. And then on the web, the situation is really not that good, because it's respected only if the developer decides to implement this support for this setting. So usually they don't, because nobody usually knows about this reduced motion. And that's also a reason why I'm talking about it a lot. So yeah. Next, I will show you an example of like, first I will show you an animation, how it looks like, and then I will show you how I see it actually, just like with the setting on, I mean. And this example is from our app, and we did this feature called Year in Review in the like last year, and the animation is from that, or like, well, yeah, the animation or example is from that feature. And let me just get it. So I'm gonna play it a couple of times, but like I'm gonna play it, and then like you can see on the screen there is this cat sleeping on a pillow, and if you look closely, you can see that the ears are moving. I'm just gonna, yes, it's replaying, and then there's like the body is moving a bit, and the whiskers are also moving. This is like really slight movement, but I wanted to show this one because, well, it's also like not that, oh, sorry. There is not that much movement, so it's not likely to trigger or like create problems. So that's why. But yeah, there is slight movement. And I'm gonna play it once again. So this is basically what most of our users see. Because if the setting is not turned on, this is what users see. But when I open the app, I can see this static image of the cat sleeping on the like pillow, and it's not moving. I can assure you it's not moving. This is a screenshot. Just like every time that I like after I watch this like recording of the animation and then I look at this picture, I think I see the cat moving still, but I can assure you it's not moving. No animation there. So that's basically like the difference, and this is something that like we paid attention to because we wanted to respect that setting. And if you want to test this setting on your Android phone, you can find the setting from settings, and then it's usually under accessibility settings, and then there's something like vision, or might be under something else. On my phone it's vision and then turn animations off, but it might be something else. But like using your favorite search engine, put your phone and turn animations off, you will probably find the like instructions for finding the setting. And then like when you turn the setting on, test the phone and see how the like experience changes, because it does. I can assure you. So yeah. Then a couple of words about the setting on Android, like from development perspective. So it's respected, as I mentioned, it's respected in most of the cases. And so when the animation is based on, like when it's animator based, then it's respected. So like it doesn't show the animation then. Or if the app is built with Jetpack Compose version 1.2.0 or higher, then it's respected. But then there are some times when you want to check if the setting is on programmatically, or you know that it's not respected automatically, so you need to probably implement the support. Well, if you are using Compose version that is lower than 1.2.0, then it's not respected. Then there might be some like cases when I don't know why it's not respected. I've encountered those, and I still don't know why it wasn't respected, even though it should have been. So there is like always, I would say, the test if it's respected. So that's always a good thing. And then if you're using something like Lottie to show the animation, I really suggest checking or testing how it looks like when the setting is on, because sometimes it just displays, or like the default behavior, for example, for Lottie, is that it shows the first frame of the animation. And sometimes it's okay, and sometimes it's not. For example, in the same feature, we have this dolphin jumping out from the water or up from the water. And for that animation, the first frame is just an almost empty like picture. So it's not ideal. So we implemented a check for that in the app. So yeah, and how you can actually check it. Let's look at some code first. I'm going to go through this piece of code in piece by piece, but basically like what we are going to talk about is a function called isReducedMotionEnabled, and I'm using Kotlin here, by the way. And this function returns Boolean if the reduced motion is enabled. Let's first take the first part. So first of all, we will need to get the like the value of animator duration scale from settings. But if it, so we can get its value is a float, and we can get it with settings.global.getFloat, and then we need to add the context.content resolver to it. And then what we are actually getting from there is settings.global.animator duration scale. So that's basically what the piece of information that we want to know. then, because that, like, if that setting is not enabled, then we actually need to handle that case or possible error. So this animator duration scale, its like value is, well, if it's implemented and the reduced motion is enabled, the value is 0. And then if it's not, it's something above 0. So basically what we want to do is that we try to get that value, that float value. And if there is a settings or setting not found exception, we catch that value and set the value to 1. Because basically, like, it can be any number that is not 0. But if it's not, the setting is not implemented, it's not there, then we can safely assume that the reduced motion is not enabled. All right. So now we have basically the animation duration. If the setting is there, it's 0, and if it's there and it's enabled, then it's 0, and if it's not, or it's not enabled, it's something else than 0. So in the next phase, or this is basically the whole function, and in this one, we check if the animation duration is 0. If it's 0, then it's enabled. If it's not, well, it's not enabled. And I've actually written a blog post about this, and I will share the link after the talk. So, you don't need to write this down or remember anything. So I will share it in a bit. All right. So we are nearing the end of the talk, and the key takeaways, or there are 3 + 1 things that I hope that you remember from this talk. So first of all, I'm going to start with the +1, actually. And it's that never use parallax scrolling, please. Please. If you don't remember anything else, please remember this. You make me and people like me really happy. But yeah, but the other 3 things are that first, not everyone enjoys animations, because they can be either distracting or they can be even like really unpleasant or even painful, because they might trigger different kinds of symptoms. And we who suffer from these symptoms, we use operating system level setting to turn the animations on or off. So please respect it. This was the point number 2, by the way. And the third one is that in Android, this setting is respected in many instances, but it's not always respected. So it's like, as with basically anything, test. Like when you are adding animations, test with this setting on. This is easier to test, because you don't need any extra hardware or anything for that. It's like if you have new enough Android phone, you can just use the settings from the accessibility settings. So that's a good thing. All right. Thank you for listening. So my name is Eeva-Jonna Panula, or Eevis Panula, and if you want to reach me, you can find all my contact info from my website, which is eevis.coach, so eevis.codes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivana, for presenting on building more inclusive Android apps. This was an amazing talk, and we learned so much. I invite everyone that's tuning in right now to please feel free to submit any questions you may have below in the chat. And while we're waiting to see if any questions pop up, I do have a couple questions that I thought after you were discussing. And so one of the things I was curious about is, and I think you mentioned this, so I just want to, I think, clarify or ensure that this was correct, is when app developers are creating the code and things like that. Do they have to ensure that the code is set to work with accessibility settings for them to work appropriately? So if they don't do that, will those apps still have that motion feature that can be problematic?
Well, I have too many thoughts where to go from here. But like, for example, with this setting, it's like for app developers, there is like usually nothing needs to be done or configured. It either works or it doesn't. So it's more about like, well, what for example, the Jetpack Compose version is, or like from those things, and not like some settings or like from like development perspective. So yes, like usually there is nothing to be done, but there might be some like cases.
I know that you work in this field and that you obviously have some familiarity and are prone to experience obviously motion sickness and things like that caused by motion on the screen. So can people with similar motion disabilities work comfortably in the tech field without facing challenges due to their disability with the motions that they can see in their everyday life?
Well, with like when knowing all these settings, like where they can be turned on or like if they are like respected and everything, I would say yes, there is no problem. Like I think for myself, I already know what to kind of like look for in the like on the internet. I know basically what to do when I encounter some movement. I have these reflexes to just close the window. So I think for myself, it's been basically the problem. And with tools like Slack, for example, there are pretty good settings for turning off like animations, for example. So like if there are emojis that have animation, they don't play, or GIFs don't play, for example, automatically. So like that hasn't been any problem for me. So yeah, I think it's not a problem, but of course sometimes there might be like, it depends a lot on tools and everything, but I think like nowadays this is something that has been actually like respected in many places, in many like tools, for example, that we use, at least in where I'm working, or where I'm working and I've been working. So yeah, that's again a bit hard to answer, but personally I felt that it's really possible and it hasn't been really a problem. There are some of these instances, these things happen, but like it hasn't prevented me from working on the field.
Sure. So for the most part, as long as you have those settings enacted that are kind of preventing that additional motion, it's not problematic in the work setting, is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hilda actually asked in the chat if you can expand on the distance covered with animations as a problem. She said she wasn't clear about that and she wants to make sure she understands.
Yeah. So distance covered. Yeah, I'm thinking like where to start, but basically like I would say it's both about like relative size of the distance, but also like the physical size of the distance. So if you have a small screen and this like animation covers the whole screen, then it's like big amount of distance covered, I would say. But also like if you have let's say like a big screen you're working with, and then there you have like browser window open, you open a web page which has like animation that goes from one side to another, then, or not even from one side to another, but let's say half of that distance, it's still like it's relatively smaller distance covered, but with the big screen, the physical distance that's covered, it's big. So like yeah, I hope that that clarifies it a bit.
Awesome. And one more question for you while we get close to wrapping up, but can you share any resources maybe you have found to be helpful in educating yourself on accessibility features that maybe people can look into to ensure that they stay top of mind when working as a developer in the field, and ensuring that they can kind of be the agents of change to ensure that people with a variety of disabilities have the resources they need?
Yeah, from like app side, I would say that for example, Android documentation, there is a good like portion of accessibility in the documentation, so it's a good starting place. And then I can actually show one book, which is called Developing Inclusive Mobile Apps, which is from Rob Whittaker, and this is about Android and iOS accessibility. So it's a like good book. I'm trying to get, maybe it's also like visible there. So it's a good resource as well, and it goes deeper than the Android documentation. And then one thing that I always say is to listen to and read about disabled people's experiences. So following people with different disabilities and impairments on whichever social media like platform you're using, that's always a good thing to do to understand what are actually the challenges. So yeah, and now that it would be really good if I had a list of people to follow, but I just realized that that's also something that I forgot to write down. So yeah.
Not a problem, not a problem. And actually, I noticed one more question came through, and I think we have a little bit of time left. What would you suggest to do if the design of an app is very animation heavy? And they added onto that to say, one, to rethink the design and try to reduce animation as much as possible for everyone, or two, to create a setting option to reduce animation for those who need it, but leave all the parallax scrolling, et cetera, as a standard setting.
Well, personally, I would say that just remove all the like extra animation. That would be better, because there are lots of people who can't, for example, use the setting or don't know about the setting, or like that there is this option. And of course, like these are often hidden in the like settings inside apps as well. And so that would be more inclusive. But then again, I know also that how hard it is sometimes to convince other people not to use animations. So I think that, of course, this operating system level settings should always be respected. But then, like, the second best option would be to have also an in-app setting, so that it could be also turned off from there for those who don't want to use the operating system level setting but want to turn the animations off from that particular app. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that. And I want to thank everyone on this call today for your amazing questions, and give a big thank you to you for your time today and your amazing talk.